Welcome back to Bold Like a Leopard. We're going to talk today about the railroading of President Trump. And when I say that he's been Sobotka-ed, many of you won't get what I'm talking about, especially some of you are not Americans or you've never seen The Wire. But I'm analogizing Donald Trump to the character of Frank Sobotka from season 2 of The Wire. So, for those of you who don't know the show, Frank Sobotka is basically a union boss of the stevedores. They're dock workers in Baltimore. And he runs afoul of Major Stan Volchek, who is a police officer, high ranking police officer in Baltimore. And basically, season 2 revolves around this entire petty argument. So here's the scene if you want to know a little bit of the background.
Wait here, this won't take long.
The fuck do you want from me? He's an E-rating, you're a G. He wants to ship, he gets to ship. Seniority, Mims, seniority. There ain't no union without it, brother.
Your sweetheart's out there.
I gotta go, Mims. I got to.
Kinda empty in here.
Everyone's working.
You getting the message?
Message?
I had people working on a window for the nave up St. Casimir's since Easter. You know that? I took money from half a dozen different people, told them where it was gonna go.
You tell Father Lewandowski?
I was gonna surprise them.
Yeah, you surprised everybody. Now there's one window too many, right?
Well, here's the thing. Father Lou says he could take another window in the rectory on the second floor.
Good for you.
No good for you, Frank. You don't want my finger in your eye. You better do what's right here.
What's right, huh? What's right would be for you to come down here to my house like a decent human being and ask a common courtesy. But that's not you, it's not your way. My old man always said you were a half-assed punk over at Holy Redeemer as a kid. And my sister said you were a pain-in-the-ass pest at all them CYO dances when none of the girls would even look at you.
Anyway, you get the point. They don't like each other, and Volchek has the real power, while Frank Sobotka only has his own pride. He's not really an honest guy. Okay, so we're not really talking about necessarily a rivalry between good and evil because Sobotka's a corrupt union boss. And I like to say that Trump is kind of like a Frank Sobotka. He's not 100% clean. Now, he's definitely not nearly as dirty as the media has portrayed him to be. But the reason that the law and the powers that be are going after President Trump has nothing to do with whether he's more or less guilty. It's more a measure of, is he a threat to their goals and desires? And in the case of Volchek, it was just a petty desire to get back at him for upstaging him by donating a stained glass window to their church. So certainly the stakes are higher than that here. But if you watch through the season, what Volchek ends up doing is initiating a big investigation from one of the city's fraud units, which is including some of the other main characters of the show, people who have more to do with the show itself, like Detective McNulty. He initiates a full-scale investigation of Sobotka. Meanwhile, that investigation uncovers real corruption and real drug trafficking and serious crimes that have less to do with Frank Sobotka, who's only looking the other way because he's been paid to do so, and more to do with the corrupt Baltimore system that is, basically unstoppable, right? The law enforcement is not going to fix it. There's too many politicians involved. There's too many different international crime syndicates involved, and the city doesn't really have the energy to actually deal with the whole problem. So Instead, Volchek is continually skewing the investigation from going after those real crimes, real drug trafficking, and real, serious violent crimes that go along with it, and instead focusing like a laser on Frank Sobotka. That's the way that the American justice system and the Biden administration and Department of Justice are going after President Trump. So to move away from this, okay, so I know some of you are tired of hearing about The Wire. I'll never be tired of it, but um, we have this whole list of people who have been um, who have been charged and either convicted or really convicted and pleaded guilty for various crimes associated with that have been associates of Donald Trump. And this is from Newsweek. There's also, so this is an older article, but there's links to articles on the recent plea deal reached by Hunter Biden and his attorneys, in which he'll get no jail time for 2 counts of non-payment of taxes, as well as a crime for lying on a federal form when purchasing a firearm, all of which are supposed to be felonies. So here's several of them. So Alan Weisselberg, a longtime so I've talked about him before, a longtime associate of Donald Trump, joined a growing list of the former president's allies who have either pleaded guilty or been convicted of crimes since the New York State real estate mogul and reality television star entered politics. Weisselberg, age 75, the longtime chief financial officer of the Trump Organization, reached a deal with the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, pleading guilty on Thursday to 15 felonies. He admitted to failing to pay taxes on some $1.7 million in income and is expected to face 5 months in prison as well as 5 years of probation. So right away, you have a person guilty of the same crime, older than Hunter Biden, with a much more pristine criminal record, who ends up pleading guilty for not paying taxes on a large sum of money, but over a much longer period of time than what we're talking about with Hunter Biden. Hunter Biden's case was about 2 years, I think. With Weisselberg, it had to do with, 15 felonies, I think, has to do with the number of years that he was not declaring some of these corporate benefits in his tax returns. That says here he will be required to testify at a trial related to charges against the Trump organization set to begin in October if prosecutors call on him to do so. His memory could prove a major factor in the his testimony could prove a major factor in the outcome of that trial, which some legal analysts have suggested could result in the so-called corporate death penalty for Trump's company. Weisselberg is the latest in a list of Trump allies who have faced criminal charges. Here's a guide to 10 Trump associates who have pleaded guilty or have been convicted of crimes. So, by the way, this is not even close to a complete list. And while some will say, well, look at all these people that he's associated with. How come Donald Trump has all of these scumbags that are in his orbit? Well, I'll tell you why these people make the list. And it isn't about committing crimes. It's all about who they happen to be, consorting with in terms of their personal, their professional business. So Rick Gates worked as a deputy to Paul Manafort on Trump's 2016 presidential campaign. He was indicted in October of 2017 and entered a plea deal in February of 2018, pleading guilty to charges of conspiracy and lying to investigators. In December of 2019, Gates was sentenced to 45 days in jail and 3 years of probation. So listen to that. The only thing he pleaded guilty to was a charge of conspiracy and lying to investigators. Conspiracy for what? I don't really know. Paul Manafort, who chaired Trump's 2016 campaign and also worked as his campaign manager, was indicted along with Gates in October of 2017. A jury found him guilty of tax fraud and bank fraud in August of 2018. He also pleaded guilty about a month later to charges related to money laundering, witness tampering, and lobbying violations. He received a 7.5 year prison sentence and was released to serve the remainder of the sentence from home in May of 2020. Trump pardoned Manafort in December of 2020, less than a month before the end of his White House term. So some of you will say, well, who cares? He's been pardoned by Trump. Well, the fact is that for somebody just like Weisselberg, who was very old, I think he's might have been in his 70s too, to be thrown in prison for white collar crimes that had nothing to do with Russian collusion. Remember, most of the people on this list were supposed to be connected to this big scheme to throw the election in favor of Trump that was connected to Russia. But in reality, sorry, I forgot that this is turned around. So, so here, that way some of you can read. So all of these people were supposed to be part of this massive scheme, and instead they get put up on charges that have nothing to do with that. Michael Cohen. So he worked as an attorney for Trump from 2006 to 2018, and also as a vice president of the Trump Organization. He pleaded guilty in August of 2018 to 8 counts, including campaign finance violations, tax fraud, and bank fraud. The charges are also related to hush money payments to women who said they had sexual encounters with Trump ahead of the 2016 election. He received a 3-year prison sentence in December of 2018, but was released to serve the remainder from home during the COVID-19 pandemic. Cohen has gone on to become one of Trump's biggest critics, regularly appearing on cable news to discuss his former boss's scandals. So I think what isn't included here is that he was also convicted of perjury. So they keep having him on because he turned against Donald Trump, but this is a guy who's a convicted liar. So it really shows that they're willing to destroy a person, destroy his reputation, in order to get to President Trump, right? And again, I've said this at the beginning that I compare Donald Trump to Frank Sobotka not because he's innocent, but because he may have certain things that are definitely shady about him, but he's not this master criminal that the Justice Department and the media are making him out to be. He's uh, of all the people who's doing something wrong that have been in Washington D.C. Trump doesn't live in D.C. anymore, but of all the people that were there as government officials, Trump might be one of the least corrupt. That doesn't mean that he's 100% clean. So I'm not trying to portray this as just this innocent person, pure as a driven snow, who's been being pursued because they're trying to destroy him because of his virtue. They're trying to destroy him because he's a threat. Because Donald Trump is somebody who's said that he's not going to abide by the rules set up by the political establishment, by people within the vested interests, whether it's the military-industrial complex, whether it is a lot of these other lobbying groups. He's basically the bull in the china shop, and they're really afraid of that. They want people who will be reliable, boring, and dependable when push comes to shove. George Papadopoulos. In 2016, Papadopoulos served as an advisor to Trump's presidential campaign. He pleaded guilty in 2017 to lying to FBI agents regarding his communication with individuals who claimed to have ties to prominent Russian officials. He served 12 days in prison and 12 months of supervised release. Trump granted him a full pardon in December of 2020. So understand this: Papadopoulos was entrapped by these people who were saying that they had access to the Russian government and Russian intelligence, and in reality there were people who were connected to Western intelligence agencies, I believe British and Turkish intelligence, if I'm not mistaken, Azra Turk and Joseph Mifsud. So these two people who were operatives not of the Russian government but of Western NATO-aligned governments led him to believe that he had he had an access to information about Russia, or that Russia was privy to information about Hillary Clinton, and he didn't take the bait. He knew that it was a ruse the whole time, but because he lied or he he did not remember correctly the series of events or what he said to a certain person. The FBI charged him with lying to one of their agents, which is a federal crime. So they totally process crimed him, which is the point here, right? Some people say, well, process crime is still a crime or whatever. So that means that you have to have perfect recall. You have to have virtually no room to actually, say, you know what, um, I don't have the details 100%. Or you could just say the whole time. If you're talking to the police in a situation like this, let's say it's to such a degree that you can't misstate something, then all you can say is that you don't remember what happened. And then what do the police have to go on if they're trying to solve a crime? They're basically getting nothing. They're getting the Stonewall treatment. That's what arrests like this cause. They cause people to decide, why am I going to testify in this criminal matter when it can land me behind bars? It could actually ruin my career. I'm just going to clam up and say that I don't remember anything. Roger Stone was indicted and arrested in January of 2019 on 7 counts, including lying to Congress, obstruction of an official proceeding, and witness tampering. This was related to Special Counsel Robert Mueller's investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 election. So in Stone's case, to summarize, he went before Congress. He behaved as if and said that he had contact with WikiLeaks and Julian Assange. He didn't actually have contact with it. The person that he claimed was his go-between later said that Roger Stone had no contact with Julian Assange, and therefore he was convicted of lying to Congress for basically bullshitting his way into that hearing, which was a dumb act on Roger Stone's part, because now that we know, um, what these people are capable of, he should have known at the time. But we're now aware that they were going to use anything in order to send a person to prison. Making a false statement to Congress. Normally, it doesn't go punished at all, but in Roger Stone's case, they actually raided his house in in the early morning when it wasn't even light out. So they marched him out in his boxers, and they embarrassed him, and they were going to send him to prison. And it's actually a good thing that Donald Trump pardoned him, because if not, somebody of his age probably wouldn't do well in prison. Michael Flynn, another very interesting, complicated situation where he was going into office. A Russian ambassador called him while he was on vacation. Flynn was slated to become the next national security advisor, and the Obama administration had just levied new sanctions against Russia. And so they called Flynn, hoping that he would be able to intercede on their behalf and get like a new, basically for them to reconsider or to meet again and try to work it out. And instead, because his phone and his other communications were already being surveilled, the FBI entrapped him by having two agents come to his office and question him regarding the phone call. And because he didn't have perfect recall, he was fired for quote unquote lying about his contact with Russian officials, and and that's it. He was being charged with making false statements to the FBI regarding his Russian contacts, not with having them to begin with, because it wasn't espionage. He was an incoming official having contact with an official of the Russian government, and these were things that he was going to do about a month later. Anyway, there's no evidence that there was any wrongdoing or anything that would have interfered with U.S. strategic goals when he was talking to Ambassador Kislyak. So those charges were later dropped, but not until Flynn had gone through a big legal battle and had to retain different attorneys. You have George Nader. So it says here Nader served as an informal foreign policy advisor to Trump He was indicted and reached a plea deal in January of 2020 related to charges of possessing child pornography and transporting a minor for sex. In June of 2020, Nader was sentenced to 10 years in prison by a federal judge. So those are serious charges. But again, they have nothing to do with Russia. And there are many indications that George Nader was actually a person who might have been a source within the Trump campaign, who was feeding information to the intelligence agencies. Um, so then you have other people. We have Steve Bannon. That had nothing to do with Trump either. It had to do with this charity, the Build the Wall charity, and it had to do with donations that were being supposedly misused. I didn't really believe that story either when it came out. I stopped following it, but from what I understand, it really wasn't a case of charity fraud. It was more like they had some loose and amateurish bookkeeping um, methods. So they got dinged because the IRS was looking for them. Why were they looking for them? Because they look for groups that are against the establishment's agenda. And it's not, look, I think that my main point today is that Donald Trump isn't the only victim. Really, a lot of people in this latest era, it's not every, if you go on the street, you don't meet many of these people. But look at all the January 6th defendants who are thrown in jail simply for things like parading in the Capitol. That was in my last newsletter, regarding um, the Trump indictment. I was saying that no, it's not a matter of the government going through him in order to get after his supporters. They're already getting after his supporters. And there's even more absurd cases than this. There was Alex van der Zwaan, who worked with Rick Gates and Paul Manafort and went to prison simply for um, making false statements to the FBI regarding the report that he wrote on behalf of Manafort and Gates' business, uh, as a PR material for the pro-Russian Ukrainian government in 2013. So that's the main point here, that you have people who were thrown in prison, even if it was for a short time. It's still a denial of freedom. Whether it was Michael Cohen, you might not like Michael Cohen today, but he shouldn't have been charged for these tax crimes to begin with, right? Because they weren't investigating him in order to look at whether he was guilty of tax evasion. They were investigating him because he could have been a go-between between Trump and Russia. Do you remember back in 2017? I happen to, but many have forgotten that people were breathlessly saying that the Russians had contacted Trump through Michael Cohen when he visited Prague, and then it later arose that the Steele dossier was completely fabricated because Michael Cohen never went to Prague. At least there is no record of him doing so. Um, those are things that they conveniently forget when you talk about this two-tiered system of justice. All these associates had to go to prison for a while, or they had these massive fines, and yet Hunter Biden did not receive anything. So this is about equal protection before the law. And while it may just be a partisan issue that you see as them being, these defendants simply belly aching because they can't, they have to, because now they're dead to rights. You may think that they're completely guilty, but why are we dragging people to the docket when originally we were investigating them for things that would have been covered under national security statutes? Consorting with a foreign government without permission or without being registered. And now, instead of applying that same standard to Hunter Biden, these people would simply say, well, all you would have done is complain anyway. That's another thing. So let's see here. So Michael Steele is a former RNC chair, and he's become basically like one of these recovering Republicans, one of these anti-Trump former Republicans. And the fact is that he said that it wouldn't have mattered if Hunter Biden had been, yeah, here we go. So he said former Republican Party Chairman Michael Steele attacked members of his party for their complaints about the plea deal reportedly struck by Hunter Biden. Um, he says it doesn't matter. Here, let's just play it.
For the first time, some corroding of Donald Trump's support, and we'll put it up on the screen for you. You can see that Donald Trump leads his closest rival, Mr. DeSantis, by 21 points. That's down from his 27-point lead in May. There's also a drop in his favorability down from May. This is a surprise because in the immediate aftermath of the indictment, there didn't seem to be any erosion at all. Do you think that this is a blip, or are you starting to see the winds of change blowing in?
And there may be a little bit of the winds of change. I wouldn't bank too much on it, though, because I think you're still looking at a hard 40% that the
Anyway, it's not going to the clip. So it says that his quote, he was quoted as saying, "It doesn't matter what the prosecution came back with," Steele said on MSNBC. What deal was negotiated here short of absolute jail time or being put under the jail? That doesn't matter for the Trump electorate, nor does it matter for Trump. He still would be claiming this was a better deal even if Hunter Biden went to jail. Well, he didn't. And that's what's so ridiculous, that they're giving a hypothetical about how Republicans would have reacted if Hunter Biden would have been given a jail sentence, or what is their point? It didn't happen. Hunter Biden was given a sweetheart deal. He was given this deal where he pleads guilty to two offenses that are serious offenses, three offenses actually. Well, three counts, two offenses, and he doesn't get any jail time. And there's many examples from either politics or outside of politics where people have been thrown in jail for the same crime and didn't get the same grace. Kodak Black, this rapper, apparently went to prison for a similar gun charge. And you have a number of black celebrities that went to prison for tax evasion, Wesley Snipes, namely. So there's this upswell of complaints now from both Republicans and also from some people in the black community where they say, hey, what's with this sweetheart deal? What's with this white privilege on the part of Hunter Biden? How come he gets this deal and some black celebrities get terrible deals and they're thrown in prison? Um, that's actually a real double standard. But people like Michael Steele will never admit that. All they will say is, well, even if we did do the right thing, you wouldn't acknowledge it. You would still find a reason to complain. So then not doing the right thing is excused by saying that the person that is watching will complain anyway. What type of moral high ground is that? I think a lot of these people are simply uh, giving up on any sort of moral high ground or consistency. If you don't believe that it's moral high ground, then at least be consistent, right? Because otherwise, you can't really claim it to be a justice system. It's just an enforcement system where the ruling group gets one set of rules and everyone else gets a more harsh and unforgiving set of rules. That's about it for today. It's actually pretty late. But please like, share, and subscribe. And you can find me on all of the different social media here, whether it is Odyssey, Rumble, BitChute, YouTube, Podbean, Gab, Mind, Substack, Telegram, Getter, Truth. I don't really use Callin anymore, and Twitter. And I'll talk to you later.